Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Google New York. So great to see you guys. We've been preparing for you for weeks, so it's awesome to see you guys here. My name is Chelsea Seabron, and it is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Google.org, who's sponsoring this, along with our amazing partners to my left here. From HBO, Participant Media, we have some members of the 3.5 Minutes, 10 Bullets film team as well with us. So the culmination of everybody here today is because of those partnerships. So some of you may be wondering, why is Google taking on this film? Why are we here talking about this? And this journey ultimately started about 6 months ago through our partnership with Pico. And so through Pico, we've had the opportunity of expanding that relationship to HBO. And I would love for you guys to stand just so people can see who you are from HBO, Participant Media. We've got Urban Cusp, who is a partnership that has come. So let's give them a round of applause. So pretty much this partnership started after the unfortunate and very tragic shootings that happened in Charleston. And after that, that was the first moment as a Google community that our various employee groups came together and said, we have to do something. We have to come together in solidarity. And we ended up actually doing a global-wide movement where everyone wore Black Lives Matter t-shirts across the globe, and we were posting these via Google+. And it was a beautiful day where, for the first time, we acknowledged what's going on in our communities that ultimately are affecting each individual employee. And so after that day, Google.org stepped up in a really huge way and made a $5 million investment in racial justice. So this is part of that investment. Since then, we've invested half of that money to organizations in the Bay Area, where I'm from. And tonight, you guys are actually the first to hear that the last of that $2.5 million will go out in any day now. So let's give it up for Google.org. So my colleagues are back home. They send their regards from California, Justin Steele and Jacqueline Fuller from Google.org. And though they're not physically here, they're trying to get those grants out the door. So let's talk a little bit about tonight's program. And as you can see, we got food and networking. Hopefully you met somebody who doesn't look like you. And tonight, we really are challenging everybody to get a little uncomfortable. And we salute everybody in this room because to take on the choice to come here tonight was not easy. Talking about race is not easy. And so, I salute everybody here for taking that decision to be uncomfortable. Especially the topic of tonight's film. We have a lot of employees who have felt their blackness, right? And Black and brown men especially have been stigmatized with awful feelings or associations of being violent or dangerous. And so tonight through this film, we will explore this topic. And I just want you guys to understand and own that we all have bias, whether it's about race or religion or anything else. We all carry our own bias. And so tonight, we just challenge you to be uncomfortable, to own, the work we need to do within each and every one of us. And this is the first step for you guys, just showing up. So thank you for showing up. So okay, thanks, Ron. And so without much further ado, this is our final screening. It's actually a pretty sad moment because I've been traveling with Ron and Lucy across the country. Google did one of these in Charleston, South Carolina. We did a second one in San Francisco to an audience of about 1,400 people. And tonight is the final, first time in New York at that. But it's so beautiful to see you all here because we've been on a little journey, a big journey. And Ron and Lucy have been on a way longer journey. So to kind of kick off an understanding of that journey, let's welcome to the stage Rahel Tesfamariam, founder of Urban Cusp. And if you don't know about Urban Cusp, you must find out. Rahel has done many things from the Not One Dime campaign, which hopefully on Black Friday no one shopped. But if you did, Rahel will tell you why not to next year. And Ron and Lucy, if you guys would also come to the stage. And let's give it for them. So Ron and Lucy are the parents of Jordan Davis, who have just so bravely and boldly relived this story time and time again to change the hearts and minds of audience members just like yourselves. And so I guarantee you, I've known them for about 6 months now, and they feel like family. And they have challenged Googlers the first time we met, right, that change starts with each and every one of us. And so I took that call very seriously when they told me the first time. So I guarantee you'll fall in love with them by the end of today and just really honor their courage to tell this story over and over again, despite that. And last but certainly not least, I want to make a plug for HBO. This documentary, this is our only post-production screening, but we had 2 pre-production ones. But a really cool opportunity to get this word out even bigger than tonight is to spread the word and get HBO if you don't have it. And you can watch this film on HBO and all streaming devices and channels as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. This is a wonderful opportunity for me because I first saw the film when Sue Patel showed it to me at a private screening. We were in director's chairs and being in a huge empty room, just crying my way through the whole entire film. And at that time, there was no clear direction about what was going to happen. There was no HBO deal. It had not yet been screened at Sundance. We were having discussions about using Urban Cuts platform to screen it, and it was a very grassroots discussion. And now, to kind of see what has happened with this film, to see that it has aired on HBO, to see that it is on the short list of Oscar nominations. I don't know if you all knew that. It is such a powerful testament to what can be done with very little, when there's a will, when there's a desire, when there's a clear purpose, and absolutely with the strength and resilience and tenacity of Jordan's parents. So I want to just personally thank them for the example that they have set for so many people. I've traveled actually all over with them in different capacities, from Aspen to Memphis. We've been all over the country, and every single time they have the whole room in tears. They have people completely inspired, eager to figure out what's next. And I think that they always leave you with a sense of, if they can do this, then I have no excuse. Because they just move with absolute resolve and conviction. And I just want to thank you for who you are, and especially at this moment in time. So speaking to the 1-year anniversary of Sandy Hook, everything that's happening in this country, the discussion that we're having about gun laws and the discussion that we're having about police brutality, this is such a timely film in the context of all of that. And this is, sorry, I'm recovering from a cold, but this is particularly the work that you're doing in terms of gun legislation. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, thank you so much. And once again, thank you so much for inviting us to be here this evening. We're so excited. Yes, definitely so. I stay extremely busy running from state to state and testifying across the country on the opposition of the expansion of all the gun laws in the country, talking to our legislators and talking to civic leaders and talking to academia, talking to other grassroots organizations, trying to begin building coalitions of other grassroots organizations and individuals that are concerned about what's happening in the country. Believe it or not, of course, we already know that in the urban communities, this violence has always been going on. And there have already been established grassroots gun violence organizations that have been doing the work. So now my job is, as a national spokesperson for Everytown for Gun Safety, and also their faith and community outreach leader, I go into these communities and I try to graft them into the national work of gun violence prevention, also within the faith community as well. So as we say, we've become the accidental activists. Neither one of us would ever have imagined that we would be doing this work, called to this work, but it is so relevant for the time. It's so sorely needed. And this is what we spend our time doing, trying to encourage and engage individuals and organizations in gun violence prevention in the faith community and diverse communities.
And so you can follow up on urbancusp.com. We just released an article today written by Sarsour Lucy. And the article kind of speaks to America's claim to be this land of faith, this place where we are driven by faith and love of God's people, and how our legislation, our policies, the racism that is enlivened in this country at this moment is actually absolutely contrary to what we say we are as a nation. So there's a very powerful piece that I encourage you to check out. And I believe when the surveys go out about the event, Chelsea, be sure to send a link to the article. So Uncle Ron.
It's my niece.
We're family, absolutely. I've heard you speak a lot about kind of your evolution and opinions about how this film and your experiences kind of relate to a larger conversation that's happening about terrorism and Islamophobia. Can you speak to some of those things?
Yes, when you look at this film, what we want to show is the families. Most of the time, when you see the major networks, they show the shooter and they show the victim. As most of the time you cannot connect with the victim, you just start hearing they had alcohol in their system. They had cocaine in their system. They had weed in their system, constantly victimizing the victim all over again. You never hear from the families. You know, every once in a while they'll pick a few family members to come out and say something, but by and large, you don't get the family members to tell the story of their child, to tell the story of their loved one. That's one of the reasons why we allow the filmmakers to come into our home, to come into our lives and make this film, 3.5 minutes, 10 bullets, to show when you take a valuable life, and all lives have value, black, white, pink, whatever, no matter what your religion, all lives have value. They have communities that love them, they have friends that love them, and they have family that love them. And we want to show that in this film. Most of the families out here, they do not get justice. We were one of the few families that got complete justice. When I say complete justice, what I'm saying is first-degree murder, life imprisonment, no chance of parole. I'm talking, you're not hearing me. I'm talking first-degree murder, life imprisonment, no chance of parole. Most of the families don't even get an indictment. We look in Chicago. They paid off the family $5 million. Took 14 months to arrest the guy that did something that they know was wrong. You shoot the first 2 bullets and the man is on the ground, and you shoot 14 more bullets, so much so that it's kicking up cement off the concrete. The mayor of the town, the city managers, the superintendent, they all have seen the tape. But what do? You pay the families off, even though they didn't even sue the city. Now, if me and you pay somebody off, what is it called? Bribery? We go to jail. Just firing the superintendent, you don't go to jail. I want to hear some jail time. You know, all these things. They only gave me 10 minutes, by the way, because they know I'm an activist, and to give an activist 10 minutes is crazy. But I'm going to try to stick to that. Getting back to the film, though, 3.5 minutes. In 3.5 minutes, when Michael Dunn was at the gas station, not only did he take the life of my son, Jordan Davis, but he also took his own life because he doesn't have freedom any longer. And for him to get that mad over loud music is really not the case. It's domestic terrorism, that black lives don't matter anymore in this country. And so that's what we have to get back to through this film. We're going to have a Q&A after the film. It's going to be hot. We got Linda here. You know she's hot, you know. And we're going to have Mo here. Lumumba is here. It's going to be hot. And so, and I just want to take a part of my 10 minutes also to recognize that we have Trayvon Martin's brother, Javaris, here. Stand up, Javaris. I know you're shy.
Come on, Javaris.
Trayvon's brother right here. And I'm so glad to see him. We were together in Geneva, Switzerland. We had great 5 days together. we hung out and got to talk about everything but our situation, so we got to know each other. And it's a great young man. And I picture Jordan, maybe he could have been working for Google. So it's a heartbreaking situation to see all you great-looking young people with these great jobs at Google. And I think of Jordan and what he could have done had he lived to be past 17 years old. And I want to thank HBO, and I want to thank Participant Media, and also Google. Thank you very much.
So before we go into the film, I'm glad you acknowledged Javarius. I think, one of the things that happens when you get to know individuals connected to victims, you often feel that their spirit lives on through the family members. So, I feel that sometimes I get a glimpse of what Trayvon would have been like through my interactions with Javarius. And I've always kind of come to understand Jordan as a younger brother in interacting with you all. But not everyone kind of gets those intimate experiences where they can talk to you and learn about you, learn about that loved one through you. So can you share a little bit about what you would want this audience to know about your son that maybe they may not get from the movie, but you want them to know?
Of course, in the movie, you don't really get a chance to know much about Jordan until the very end. And so there's always the backstory that you don't know about. The backstory about where he was raised and all the friends that he had and all how he was raised. He was homeschooled for many, many years. He was raised in church. Good, strong foundation, spiritual upbringing, loved by many, many people. Jordan, unlike his father, never knew a stranger. Made friends very, very easily. And I could definitely see in each one of his friends, I could definitely identify something that Jordan was able to relate to. Jordan had a very big, compassionate heart. Jordan was always the kind of kid that he wanted everybody to have the same. He wanted everybody to have the same opportunities. He wanted everyone to be educated on the same level. He was always a champion for the underdog. And so those are the things that you don't get to know about Jordan, that we love about Jordan, that we continue to embrace because, we have to embrace those memories because we don't physically have him here anymore. Jordan was just the life of the party. Even his friends said whenever Jordan walked in the room, there was a light. And he was always trying to make you laugh. He had a great sense of sensitivity and a great sense of spiritual understanding. We used to have deep discussions in my kitchen and in the car when he was riding next to me. And I would often say, Jordan, how do you know some of the things that you profess to know? And he'd say, I don't know, Mom, I just know. Just very intuitive, very, very wise beyond his years. But there again, I always prayed that the Lord would give our child tremendous strength and wisdom and understanding. And so he did end up being all of those things, and just a lover of people. And I used to always say, I think you're going to be a social activist. I see you bringing people together. I see you championing for a cause. And actually, yes, he is.
Thank you so much. We're going to... would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that understand that when you have dealings with your parents, if you're a young person here, and the older people that have children, one thing I always thank God for is that the last words that you say to your loved one before they die. Think about that, because whether it's good or bad, you have to live with that for the rest of your life. And Jordan was going to the mall on Black Friday, and he asked me for some money to go with his friend shopping, and I gave him some money, and I hugged him, and I told him that I'd see him after work and that I'd see him when I got home. And those were the last words that was between us, the last smile that was between us. And I thank God for that, because sometimes, we argue with our children or you argue with your parents. Just think if that was the last word you had with your loved ones. So when you go home today, tonight, and during the holidays and you're with your loved ones, make sure those, never know, last words are great words. That love is said between you. That all the things that are little, minute things, especially during the holidays, people have a sense of this heightened things during the holiday. That's why people argue a lot during the holidays. People want to come to certain homes and they don't get there because of certain things like traffic or whatever the case may be. And it's always the good and the bad during the holidays. That's why there's so many suicides during the holidays. So after this film, I want you to really look at how parents fight, like me and Lucy fought as hard as we could for Jordan. And I want you to fight for your loved ones, for your parents and for your sisters and your brothers. Fight hard for them, because you never know the next day whether they're going to be around. See, we assume that we're going to see them. We get on the phone and we say, okay, we'll see you tomorrow. And we really believe that, don't we? We believe that. But God has another plan. And I get on my knees and I thank God every night that God gave me 17 years of Jordan Davis. Gave me 17 years, and that's all I'm supposed to have. I have to sleep at night and understand I was only supposed to have 17 years, and that is what I got. That's what I received. So every day in my life, I say I'm one day closer to Jordan, because I want to get there where Jordan is. Thank you.
So in conclusion, we did mention that Jordan was killed on Black Friday. And so Black Friday recently passed, but one of the inspirations behind the Not One Dime boycott is because so many of the victims of police brutality were killed exactly around this holiday season, be it Black Friday, Christmas, the one-year non-indictment in Eric Gardner's murder, as well as the one-year non-indictment in the Ferguson decision. And so beyond this season, every year I ask people to kind of use this holiday season as economic resistance to these incidents of racism and police brutality. So honor the memory of Jordan Davis and victims of police brutality by resisting a capitalist system that does not bring justice when justice is due. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Again, Torrence Boone. I'm a senior leader here in the global business organization at Google, based in New York. And on behalf of Google, I want to thank you all for coming this evening, for carving out time to speak with us, spend time with us, and discuss a set of incredibly important issues for us as a collective society. So we're going to dive in. If I could get the panel to come on stage, and I will do quick introductions. All of you have more detailed bios that were handed out as part of the registration process. So I'm going to do quick one-liners, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. Thank you. Okay, so to my right here, we have Meltzer-Cohen. And Mo is a criminal defense attorney and teaches criminal law at Hunter College. And next to Mo, we have Linda Sarsour, who is co-founder of MPower, and she's also the National Advocacy Director for the National Network for African American Communities, and she also serves locally as the director of the Arab American Association of New York, which is a social service agency serving the Arab community in New York. We met Ron and Lucy earlier today, and next to Lucy is Lumumba-Bandele, who is the senior community organizer in the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, their criminal justice practice. Again, a warm welcome for our panelists. So I'm going to go a little bit off script, not that we were at all scripted, but as I was packing up my office to come to the event tonight, and some of you may have seen that it was just announced today that in my native Baltimore, a mistrial was declared in the case against William Porter, the police officer who was accused of involuntary manslaughter, second-degree assault against Freddie Gray. I think probably everyone has the context of that situation, but in case not, because unfortunately there have been so many issues and so many incidents that it starts to blend together. But Freddie Gray was abducted by a group of police officers in Baltimore after an altercation. He was handcuffed, put in the back of a van. The van drove around Baltimore for about 40 minutes, 6 stops along the way, And during that time, Freddie Gray suffered a broken neck and other bodily injuries that resulted in his death. So I thought, given this late-breaking news and the backdrop of the powerful story that we just heard about Jordan, I would start with the panel to get their perspective on this outcome, to frame this outcome today in the greater scheme of what we all just witnessed in the film, and to kick us off with the implications of that mistrial judgment for our discussion tonight. And perhaps Ron and Lucy could provide their thoughts as a kickoff.
Well, it's all right to be uncomfortable tonight, right? Is it all right? We can tell truth tonight? Okay. First of all, the system itself is unjust, but it's rigged to be unjust. It covers its own behind. I can say ass in this room, right? It covers their own ass, you know? And so when you look at a system where the prosecutors, they have a symbiotic relationship with the police department, they close many of their cases with this same police department. So they're on a friendly basis, and they uplift the police when they testify against other defendants. So I cannot uplift a policeman and then tear him down later on when he commits an act such as what happened with Freddie Gray, because I've held him up to a standard, and then I've closed 12, 13 cases with him or her, and then all of a sudden now, if I tear him down, we have to go back and relook at all those cases that we closed by saying this is an upstanding cop. So you have to understand that the system itself, now the city managers that are worried about lawsuits against the city, who are they going to stand with? The police department. So the state attorney is supposed to be the victim's advocate, because you understand in this legal system that we have, a defendant can get the best defense that money can buy. Am I correct? Best defense that money can buy. If you're a multimillionaire, you can get a multi-million-dollar team of attorneys. But think about the victim's family, like in our case. You are represented by the prosecutor in that county. You don't have a choice. You can be a billionaire. You don't have a choice. You have to be represented. And if the prosecutor is a knucklehead, you know, if the prosecutor is a friend of the police, if the prosecutor is a friend of the court, the prosecutor is a friend of the city clerk, and he knows if he prosecutes this policeman, he must maybe have the police end up having to pay $5 million like in Chicago to the families, $10 million, the Garner family, you know, all this. So they have an invested reason to acquit the police department when there's wrongdoing. The only reason I still say today that we got justice in Jordan Davis' case is because he was not shot by a policeman. That is the only reason we got justice. Had it been the policeman, that prosecutor, the same one that let George Zimmerman get away with murder, is the same prosecutor that we had here. And they would have let him get away with murder also if he was a policeman. So we have to change that system. The system is unjust. It can't defend itself. It can't, you know, I would say go outside of that jurisdiction and get somebody else and bring in a separate prosecutor whenever there's a police shooting, because they cannot prosecute themselves at all. We see it time and time again. Tamir Rice case, we see it time and time. In Tamir Rice case, even said that this particular police officer had been kicked out of another police department, told him that he was unfit to be a policeman, and he still was hired by another department in Cleveland, and within 2 seconds shoots a 12-year-old when they had to report that this was a play gun. So we see that time and time again, and the only way to change it is to make sure that you get outside representation for the victim's family and the victim, and not use the prosecutor in the same jurisdiction.
Yes. Lucy.
And once again, we see this as another example of just horrible, horrible behavior that continues to happen within our police force against, you know, our people of color, people in our communities. But I will say this, is that we talk a great deal, as a people, we talk a great deal about how bad it is and what's happening out there, but we're not doing anything about it. I will say is that, yeah, we rally in the streets. Yes, we do all those kinds of things. But to make the systems accountable to us, to protecting us and our rights and our freedoms in this country, we have to be part of the solution. And that goes beyond rallying, and it goes beyond praying. We need to be there talking to the chief justices. We need to be there talking to our legislators. We need to be there in those systems that continue to extend this kind of behavior towards people of color. We need to make them accountable. It's not going to be enough to rally in the street about it. It's not going to be enough to talk about how horrible it is and wait till the next atrocity happens. If we are not in there voting out the justices and all of the lawyers and the people that we put in place that allow these kinds of things to happen, then all we're going to do is talk about it. And all we'll continue to do is talk about the next time it happens and the next time it happens and gather and talk about it behind closed doors. So we have to be accountable as a community of minorities, as a community in urban communities. We have to be accountable for making the change happen. We have to pressure the powers that be to make these changes. We have to let them know that they are accountable to us, and we will take them out of office. When you go to the polls, when you go and you're voting for your local and civil leaders, at the local level, this is where all of this happens. This is where all of this happens. You have a responsibility to go to the polls and to scream loudly and clearly about what's happening. And if you don't, shame on you.
Lumumba, you were in Ferguson. You've spent your career working in New York City on community activism. What are some of the big lessons in the context of the discussion so far that you would offer up, things that you do in your community work that could address some of these issues?
Well, before I get to some of the tools, I want to sort of add another insult onto what we're doing right now, what we're talking about right now, as we hear about the mistrial in Baltimore. We also got word that Kenneth Boss, one of the cops responsible for the murder of Amadou Diallo, is just set to get a promotion on the NYPD tomorrow. So I want to add that to really underscore what both Ms. McBath and Mr. Davis have said. You know, we've been down this road so many times, and we have to recognize the tools we have in our toolbox. Voting is one tool. It's an effective tool. If that is the tool that you use, that you have sharpened, that you've mastered, that also means that you have another tool directly connected to that, and that is to exist and have a strong presence in the jury. We have a culture of wanting to make sure we do everything possible to stay out of the jury box. I got a cold, I got to work, whatever. If you feel that strongly about your tool of voting, you should have no problem whatsoever existing and making up your presence and developing a culture of doing jury takeovers to make sure that we have different outcomes, right? So that's that. We have other tools. If your voice is heard loud and strong in the streets, do it. If that's not your place, where is your place? How will you make your voice heard? But being home talking about the young people in the streets is not helping. Being home talking about all the other tools that you consider to be ineffective is not helping. What's your tool?
Linda.
Bring it.
Oh, I don't know after that. I mean, I'm sure most of you are probably in the same emotional space that I'm on, but I'm really moved. And I've been moved before by Lucy and Uncle Ron, and just, you know, I have a son who's also 17 years old, and just just hearing the voices of Uncle Ron and Lucy in that in the movie just really touches me deep to my core, and it reminds me about the value of life and whose life matters and who says whose life matters and whose word matters. And I worked this past year with a family in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where 3 young students, college students, 2 young women who looked just like me. They could have been my little sisters. Literally, they look exactly like me. People thought they were related to me. And I worked with this family, helping them get their voice out in the media. They were shot execution style by a man who was basically Islamophobe. You know, they were his neighbors. And he literally went into their home, shot them in the head, each one at a time. He shot them. And the media wanted you to believe that a man would be so angry that he could shoot 3 young Muslim students execution style over a parking spot. We were supposed to believe that Michael Dunn was so angry, that he was so scared for his life, that he was going to shoot 4 teenage boys in a car. And what this reminds me of, our common enemy, the word of white supremacy against our communities. That we can walk around in the street and people can snatch their kids up from next to our kids playing in the park because they don't want their kids to play with terrorists. Or a woman who wants to snatch her purse when she sees a young black man because all black people are criminals. This idea of who labels us and who are we to who. It gives me affinity, and that's why many folks in this room that I know, and why I work on issues like police brutality, which don't necessarily directly impact me as an individual, but what I believe is we live in a country that if black life doesn't matter, then my life and the life of people who look like me is not going to matter. And if we don't make and force our country to make black life matter, for us to really believe that, not just to say it, but for it to be real for black people, then there's nothing that I can do that's going to make people who look like me's life matter, will make me valuable, make my children valuable. And just recently, you know, with our kids, you know, watching TV and all they hear is Muslim terrorists, Muslims, everybody, you know, it's like the trauma that young black kids hear when they hear thugs and gangsters, and, you know, what kind of message does that send to our children? Our children start questioning who they are. They're not taught in this country to be proud of who they are. Our children right now are asking, like, is Muslim the right choice? Why are we even that? That there must be something wrong here. And I think that what people don't understand is the trauma that causes young people, and that's why our kids struggle to succeed in this world, because they haven't found their place. And the institutions that they're trying to impress or they're trying to prove to are institutions that have been created not to accept people like them. The system wasn't made for people like us. So I have a lot of affinity to Trayvon, to hearing the vilification of people even when they're dead and their corpse, their bodies are still warm, and we vilifying them, talking about what they did 2 weeks ago and 6 years ago. It just really breaks my heart that we live in a country where we continue to do this.
Mo, as a criminal defense attorney, a professor of criminal law, can you give us more context on what's going on here? What are the legal drivers that are at play? Ron mentioned the prosecutors, that issue. What are the other things that drive the kind of outcomes that we're seeing from the criminal justice system, and what can we do to address them?
Oh, just an easy one, right? I do want to make one small correction. I'm not teaching criminal law right now. I have taught criminal law. So I think it's really important for everybody, but I think particularly for people who have the luxury of maintaining this sort of delusion, to stop thinking about the police as being an organization, an institution that is there to protect all people. So the whole concept of policing was developed in the United States. Policing is not an old institution. It's a fairly new institution, and American policing was developed in the United States to protect the property of moneyed white people at a time when black people were considered property. So I think that one of the things that's going on is, yes, that's what the police are there for. Another thing that's going on is, as Ron said, we need special prosecutors because the way that cases get closed is that the police testify against criminal defendants, and since the police are the people who are out there selectively enforcing laws and disproportionately and aggressively policing working class communities of color, that means that, you know, their entire job description involves putting poor black people in jail. And so it becomes very difficult to for a prosecutor to sincerely and earnestly and zealously prosecute a police officer. So I think that call for special prosecutors is absolutely right. And I really want to second what Lumumba said. You know, people, I know that we have a sort of, it's almost become a running joke about jury service, but this is actually an opportunity, right? If for you to go and truly serve your community, to be a peer, right? To render judgment or to refuse to punish someone, you know, to hear all that evidence and to really act in the service of justice, right? Because the law and justice are not related to each other. And I think that, you know, especially for people who have always had the privilege of believing that the law and justice, that's a Venn diagram that has a real substantial overlap, it's time to shed that idea. It's time to really acknowledge the reality of what is happening and what has always been happening. I think it's a real mistake to think that this is a system that started out good and got corrupted, or that this is a system that in some way can be redeemed, because it has never been intended to serve all people equally. I think it's really crucial, it's really critical for anyone who has relative power to be really honest with themselves and to be really honest with whoever's, you know, proximate to you, to your communities, to work to dismantle the idea that the law and justice, that any well-developed concept of justice has really any relationship to the American legal system.
On the topic of special prosecutors, how does that happen? How are special prosecutors appointed? What are the situations that underpin that?
I mean, it usually happens when there's an egregious abuse of power. But this actually isn't, I'm not sure I'm entirely qualified to answer that question as far as the technical aspects of it. But I think the sort of the central piece of why we need special prosecutors is that the whole logic behind having a special prosecutor is that whoever is normally the prosecutor is too entrenched in a system of power that has gone horribly wrong, and where that power has been so egregiously abused that there is just, it's not possible to maintain even the appearance of impartial justice.
You know, it's interesting, but when you say who has the power, actually who has the power is the governors of the states. You have to realize the federal government was created by the 13 colonies, you know, and they've taken back the power from the federal government. So that's why you see every time there's a mass shooting, President Obama looks like he just swallowed an egg. You know, because every time he puts out something to discourage shooters, even in the no-fly zone, you know, anything that he puts out says, well, if they're on the no-fly list, then we should make sure that they don't get a chance to get guns. And he shakes his head because he knows if he tries to pass it through Congress and he tries to pass it through the Senate, they won't pass it. But see, when I say power, the governor of Connecticut decided, you know what? If you come into Connecticut and you're on the no-fly list, you cannot get a gun or bring a gun in the state of Connecticut. So the governors do have the power to do it. And he made an executive order to be effective immediately. See, so the governors of each state can actually take action.
Yep.
If I can, I want to give a little history about at least in New York, the call for which was originally independent prosecutors. In '95, many of us were doing this work in response to the killing of Anthony Baez, who was murdered Christmas Day by Officer Francis Lavodi. And we decided that we needed to stop this pattern of continuously trying to go to DAs to get justice when we recognized for decades that this was a pattern that was not happening. We recognized that there was a significant conflict of interest that Mr. Davis clearly explained that does not allow the prosecutors to be objective in any way in terms of investigation and certainly not prosecution. And so the call from the community, particularly the parents at that time, was for an independent prosecutor that did not have any attachment to the state. Now, people have said, well, what does that look like? Well, I mean, it hasn't manifested itself in any real way other than a state attorney general taking it over, and that's where the term special prosecutor came in. And so even with the executive order that was passed here in New York State earlier this year, that was done based on decades of pushing. When people told us in '95, that's impossible, that will never happen. People told us earlier this year, told their parents, the state attorney general and the governor hate each other. There's no way in the world they'll come to an agreement for this to actually happen. But it wasn't until those parents stood with people in the street, stood with elected officials, said this is not even negotiable. It's gonna happen, that it actually happened. It's not perfect. In fact, the governor's playing with words, trying to make it sound like it's temporary, but it's not exactly what we want, but it is a step in the right direction.
Yes. We're going to open it up in just a few minutes for questions from the audience. We want to make sure that we address any questions that you have. So if you want to step to the mics, please do that. Just to continue the dialogue around what we can actually do. I mean, here at Google, we are incredibly action-oriented. We have a mission around making the world a better place, changing the world for the better through technology, through our community of team members around the world. And I guess my sort of last question before we open it up would be, what do you think we can do as Google from an individual perspective, from a corporate perspective, to push this more aggressive agenda and address the issues of criminal injustice that we've been talking about?
I think, I mean, for me, one of the things that I really focus on is intersectionality. How do we tell each other stories? How do we guide each other's back when we're not in each other's rooms? And I think that's really important. Like, I want to be the first person to defend, you know, a young black unarmed kid that's shot by the police. And I want, you know, black people, which this already happens because I've been working and building relationships, you know, to say when they hear someone say we got to lock the Muslims up or we don't want them here, that you're the first person to be like, wait, chill, like that's not cool. Like, so I think what I always tell people is, like, ask questions. Like, you might have a friend at Google who is Muslim, you know, have a conversation, check them out, be like, hey, I'd love to see you at the cafeteria for a few minutes, want to ask you some stuff. I think a lot of times we're so apprehensive to ask people and kind of find out who they are. They're not just the Google executive. They're not just like the little programmer. They're actually a person, and they have a family. They have aspirations. They have dreams. They have kind of music that they like. And I think oftentimes we don't see each other in that way. And I think the best relationships that I have and the best activism work, the best movement work that I've done is when I'm at somebody's house, or when I went to a movie with them, or when I went to chill with them after a rally and just hung out in a park and sat on a bench and heard about their kid and what happened last week. And I think oftentimes we're so up here trying to be all like, we're social justice, we're going to like bring justice to the world. But really the times where I felt the most meaningful moments for me was when I heard about somebody's brother who got shot and I got to hear that story personally, or someone whose, you know, father got deported just for simply not having papers. I think those are the most meaningful moments of just being able to see people for who they are as human and kind of shed off all that extra stuff and just kind of hear that, you know, just from the heart. I think that's really the most moving thing that has helped me believe that there is still hope in the world, even through all the darkness that we see.
I would add that I was trained as an organizer to, when you want to impact an issue, the first question you ask yourself is, what is my individual and collective relationship to that issue or those issues, right? Google is the platform of the earth right now, right? You actually have the ability to tell the story in a way that impacts the world and how they see us, how they see our experiences. So I think being able to highlight other independent media is extremely important so that people are not relying solely on CNN, on NBC, on Fox, but being able to allow independent media that comes from us, that actually shares our values and actually tells our stories the way they need to be told is extremely significant. And then some of the small things you do, like them little configurations you have on the Google thing when you do stuff like on Black History Month, those things are really impactful, you know? I think those are important. So things like that, I think, go a long way. Being able to allow people to have access to the source is extremely important.
And everything is money driven. I mean, be encouraged by what happened at the University in Missouri, I believe it was, what the football team did. Be encouraged. These young people put their careers on the line and say, you know, we're not going to play a football game until we get rid of this racist.
That's right.
You know, so be encouraged by that as young people. And, you know, when I've attended YouTube and Black Googlers, they tell me that the YouTube channel, you can reach 12 million people across the country at one time. Look at that power that you have. Understand the power that you have in this room, that the power you have in these buildings. And so I would say follow the money. Do like ALEC. ALEC is an organization that the NRA uses, you know, and they are basically lobbyists. And they go all across the country and they take these congressmen and women and senators on these junkets and all that, and they teach them to vote the way they want them to vote. Well, we got to be better than ALEC. You know, we have to be a group. Googlers have to be a group. YouTubers have to be a group. And you have to contact these senators and contact, like you say, these Congress people. And you have to see what side are they on. And if they're not on the side of righteousness, if they're not on the side of truth, Google them out of office. YouTube them out of office. You have the power to do that. You know, sometimes we have power, we don't realize how much we have. You know, you say, well, I'm just an individual. How much can I do? But look all the individuals you know. Look all the Facebook people you know. Look at all the people that you get on your YouTube channel. On Jordan Davis, we started a Jordan Davis, a Rest in Peace Jordan Davis page, and within about 3 or 4 weeks, we had over 220,000 people on that page. And we're just a family. You guys have a nation to deal with. You can Google yourself to death, you know? So I say you have a lot of power. Use that power to take money away from people that are not thinking like you, that are not thinking about truth, and the other people that are thinking like you and thinking about truth and trying to do the right thing but don't have the backing of the people in the mainstream media. Use your Google power, use your YouTube power, and uplift these people and get them in office.
And when you want to know something, what do? You Google it. Exactly. So use the resources that you have. And also, I always say is that, you know, our people do perish for lack of knowledge. So use the tools as they're talking about. Google information. Make it available to your constituents. Make it available to organizations that are collaborating with you. Make information available to them as to how they can be actively involved. If there's something that you are creating within Google, within this organization, make it available and accessible. Use your tools. Information, education is the key.
Mo, any other thoughts?
I would second everything that has just been said. I would also add that for some of us, maybe the most valuable thing we have to offer is not actually money, right? Because not all of us are Googlers. We don't all have this kind of platform, and probably not everyone in this room does. But you have other really valuable things to offer. And I just want to get a quick check. Who was moved by the movie you just watched? Yeah, okay. So remember how important culture is. You know, ask people, engage with people, interact with people, but also some of this work, okay, white people, I'm talking to you. White people, some of this is just on us, right? Decenter yourself, go home, don't make people do your own, don't make people do emotional labor for you, don't make people educate you. Go home, read bell hooks, there's PDF roundups on the internet. Read, you don't have to get all academic about it. Go read all the Octavia Butler, go read all the Nalo Hopkinson. You can enter into, a relationship with culture and educate yourself. You will never understand what it means to be a black woman, and that's okay, but you need to re-educate yourself so that you can learn to see what the universe looks like from the point of view of a black woman, from, specific black women who are writing about it. You need to re-educate yourself, refine your mind, exercise your social imagination, and go home and do that work at home by yourself. Ask questions, but also, take it upon yourself. You will be a better person all the time. You guys have a saying, right? Is this Google, don't be evil?
Right.
Don't be evil.
First question.
I want to thank Jordan's parents for being here and for sharing your story and Jordan's story. I knew the story already, but it was just really powerful to sit through that and get a feel for what that process was like for you. So thank you for that. My question is, I was struck in the documentary about just the lack of humanity that Michael Dunn had. I mean, to the very end, seeing himself fully as a victim really struck me as very twisted. And it made me wonder, since he has this lack of humanity, this complete lack of ability to relate to a Jordan Davis, who is in that courtroom besides his family and loved ones who can relate to him? You talked already about special prosecutors. I know that's not what you're trying to change is not easy. Another angle that I'm wondering, and I'd like to hear your opinion about, is I believe it's something like 95% of all elected prosecutors are white. And I think even the majority of them are white men. And I'm wondering if you think that having more diversity in those elected positions would even be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely, if we go to the polls. Let's be very simple. I mean, let's be very clear about this. Most of us will go to the polls for our federal elections. We're voting for presidents. But we're not voting on the state and local level where all of these individuals are being placed in office. So if we're not voting, then we're not using our voice. If we're not using our voice, there is no effective change.
And you could see change. I can't remember the name of the judge, somewhere in the South, and but anyway, this judge recently, within the last 2 months, had a case. This black man was the defendant. And so the prosecutors in these cases, they all have 10 strikes. And more times than not, they use all the strikes against African Americans. Sometimes you look at these juries and say, well, how come this is an all-white jury? How come there's only one black person on the jury? Well, if a prosecutor, if he looks at that and the defense attorney says, you know what, I'm going to get this guy prosecuted and going to get this guy to go to prison, I'm going to use all my strikes on black people. And as long as it's not racially given to the judge, and he uses all the excuses in the world, do you know anybody that ever been in prison? Uncle Leroy, has he been in prison? Has Choo-Choo been in prison? And, all these things to bamboozle the judge, but they get those strikes, and that's why in the Trayvon Martin case, you had basically an all-white jury. In our case, out of 12 people, there were 2 black. These are the things, because we sit there as parents, we watch these strikes, we attended it. And they kept striking, and they used 98.9% of their strikes against African Americans. So sometimes it's not us not trying to get on the jury, they won't let us on the jury.
But even, I'm sorry, but even to your point before, this was something that we were very disheartened by,
right,
is that in both jury selections, we sat through those jury selections, and our people did everything they could to not be on
Well, they tell the truth. See,
Yeah.
what happens is when you're in court, African Americans, you go in and you start telling the truth. Sometimes that gets you off the jury telling the truth. Have you heard anything about the case? Yeah. I was over Mama's house and I heard about it. Strike. White people, a lot of times, they want to be on the jury. And they lie that no, I was up in the hills in Montana, never heard anything about Jordan Davis. They want to get on the jury. So we have to think about that. Sometimes maybe you have to tell that little white lie to get on the jury. You know, don't be so honest. I see a lot of honest people get off the jury, you know. But this African-American judge, going back to that, is that he did make a difference. What on this all-white jury and with this black defendant, he actually stepped up and said, you know what, I'm going to take a recess and I'm going to dismiss the jury. He said, because I don't believe this young man is getting a fair trial. So if you Google that, this happened recently, you know, and he wanted to impanel another jury, you know, that was fairly representing of that city and of that county. So yeah, it does make a difference, you know, if we can, you know, have a lot of jurors do that and have a lot of judges do that, I mean.
Can I just add one quick thing?
Yeah, sure.
Michael Dunn was engaging, displaying straight white supremacy. He wasn't acting like a victim. He straight believed that as a white man, he could pull out a gun and shoot some black kids and nothing was going to happen to him. And this is the problem that we have in this country, that immediately when a white person shoots a person of color, we start being like, he twisted, he crazy, I don't know what he did, he was mad at his wife, and we try to make all these excuses for them. They believe they can do this. A white police officer believes he's going to shoot a black unarmed kid and get away with it because he's going to get away with it. So sometimes we internalize that, right? But when I was listening to Michael Dunn, I was listening to white supremacy straight up. That's exactly what it is. So I feel like we need to call it that every time. White supremacy is the common enemy up here for all of us. When we look at people talking about deporting immigrants, killing unarmed kids and justifying it, whether it's white males killing black teenagers because they're listening to loud music like we hear every day in Brooklyn, this is white supremacy, sisters and brothers, and we got to just keep calling it that every single day.
And it's domestic terrorism.
Domestic terrorism.
And I would like to just add to that also to complicate this a little bit, right? You know, in your situation, the white supremacist was the criminal defendant, and that's actually fairly unusual. Usually the white supremacist is the prosecutor side, the police system, you know, and so I think that, Linda, what you just said really helps to clarify. It's not that we're anti-defense attorney or anti-prosecutor, it's that this system, as adversarial as it is said to be, is simply one face of white supremacy, and I do think it's important for all of us, and especially white people, to get real and start calling it white supremacy.
Yep.
And I'll just add really quickly to answer your question. We've said the same thing about diversifying racially police forces, and we've recognized that it has had significant limitations. And so black prosecutors will probably help in some manner, in some level, but until we actually address the full systemic issues with the prosecution and the criminalization of black folks will continue just to provide that same function in that particular system.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm a drug policy activist as well as a former Google student ambassador. I guess my question is, Ron mentioned earlier before the movie started how oftentimes the media victimizes the victims for having drugs in their system, whether it be alcohol, marijuana, as we saw in the Michael Brown case. One, how is this movement, Black Lives Matter, as well as the work that you do, I guess, talking about these issues about drugs, especially in light of marijuana legalization happening at a nation scale, coupled with capitalism that is entering as the industry that is growing? And then following that question, all of you have mentioned being part of the system, whether it's being in your elected official's office, whether it's being on jury duty. How do you ensure that you are within the system, but at the same time not co-opted by the system?
When I look at, I think about Muhammad Ali, what he said years ago. He said, why do you think they call it dope? You're dope, but that's what you do. Because they use that to justify your murder. You know, they justify your value to the world if you're a dope head. You know, I can kill him. Michael Dunn, what did he say? He says, well, if I didn't kill Jordan, maybe he could have killed somebody else, so I'm doing a public service. Right. You understand what that means? That means that Jordan's life didn't matter regardless, whether he had a shotgun, a pipe, or whatever. It just, his life didn't matter to a white supremacist, to a domestic terrorist. And so when you look at the aggravated part of it, because the first thing they're going to do is toxicology, is find out what you had in your system, not what the shooter had in his system. Never find out. Walter Scott was shot in the back 6 times. They didn't find out what he had in his system to this day. But Walter Scott had a little alcohol in his system, had a little cocaine, about as much as Leon Spinks would take, a little bit, but they never say that. And so I tell people, it doesn't devalue your life if you have something in your system. It's never a case that you should be shot at, killed, whatever the case may be, and we sit up here and let them narrate the story why you were killed. I don't care, the biggest dope head on the street deserves to live. So that's not an excuse to kill, but that's the excuse that they make why we killed him. And so when you look at situations like Mr. Daniel Holtzclaw in Oklahoma City that decides, I'm going to go in a drug-infested area and start raping black prostitutes and start sodomizing black drug users, because guess what? Their life don't matter. Nobody's going to believe them because they have drugs in their system. But you know what? Daniel, you're wrong. Convicted of raping and sodomizing 13 African-American women in Oklahoma City. Guilty as charged. So you can't affect change, and I think change is coming. And I say, unlike the old women in the church, they say wait for change. I say go get change. Go get change.
I'm sorry, if I can really quickly, your last comment about how do you interact with the system without becoming, the language I chose is very specific and intentional when I talked about your tools. And I'm going to take my LDF hat off for a minute because I can't represent them in what I'm about to say. We're at war. We are at war. And we need to be very clear about how we engage in this warfare. One particular strategy is not going to win the war. We have to look at every single mechanism we have available. Look at your tool, master your tool, engage in it.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Morgan. First of all, I wanted to thank Jordan Davis's parents for coming out and having the strength and courage to share your story with us. Secondly, my question is about a call to action. I was wondering, you guys mentioned certain strategies that we should take as people to fight this injustice, fight this social injustice. But as a young person, I constantly find myself sort of helpless in figuring out what to do. I just graduated college, and they educate us all about the system, and they tell us, that call a spade, blah, blah, blah. I know the system in and out, but I'm not really sure what to do about it. And so I was wondering if you could, I know you guys, you briefly touched on some of the things that you suggested for calls to action, but as a young person, what are you guys looking for us to do? I know personally my career path does not involve law or anything, but that does not take away from my passion for fighting this injustice.
I work for Everytown for Gun Safety, and actually I'm a national spokesperson and community and faith outreach organizer for them. And we give you lots of tools that you can use, and you don't have to necessarily do what any of us does. And as he said, it takes everybody working in their own lane to create the changes that we need. But you can be involved in campaigns around the country. Campaigns for gun violence prevention, campaigns against, policing, campaigns and rallies. You can do those things. You can definitely go to the polls and vote. You definitely have that tool. That's extremely important. So everytown.org, go on that website right there, and you can find different ways that you can be actively involved, even if it's just tweeting your legislator and saying, I'm unhappy with what's happening in my community, sending them Facebook posts, even if you just want to call your legislator. You can do all those kinds of things. And then particularly, social media is the biggest proponent for cultural change in this country. And you all are experts at that. So definitely continue to create a movement. You can do that. You can be posting your friends and tweeting and talking about the ills and everything that you see happening in your communities and in society and with people of color. That's what you can do.
Some of these online places, I looked at a site that I'm very familiar with, the creator of the site, Urban Cusp, CUSP. Very familiar with that site. And, one of the good things that she does is that, and I think would help young people. See, I got to give you the plug. Here you go. But, they have cards and stuff, and they say, print these cards to tell you what to do in case you're stopped by a cop that may be a domestic terrorist, a white supremacist. They have these cards, and they tell you, I even say, go hand out the cards to people in urban areas, people that are in poverty that may not know what to do, may not know what their rights are. Hand out the cards, and on the back, have a phone number of a lawyer in the local city, because that helps the people. Because, a lot of the people get killed because they don't know what to do. When they see the red, blue, and white lights, they panic. And, running can get you killed. Running while black, they can get you killed. Used to be a time in the cowboy days you get shot in the back. That's wrong, but not now. You get shot in the back all the time. So, as I told Jordan in the film, and I was in the swimming pool, protect yourself. That will hurt me to my dying days that Jordan didn't listen to his dad. When I say protect yourself, all occasion doesn't call for you to be loud. All occasion doesn't call for you to exert your rights. All occasions, because, at the end of the day, Morgan, I want you to come home to your parents. Yes. You understand what I mean? At the end of the day, okay? So go to those sites and know your rights, and know that, you may think you're being wrong, but there's a forum to show where you're being wrong. But at the time that you're in the bright lights, where the person is not wearing a hood, like the KKK, but he's wearing a badge and a gun, you got to let him win that day, but you win the fight later on and go home to your parents. Okay.
Thank you.
I want to add to that, too. You're not going to, well, I don't want to say you're not going to, but you shouldn't expect yourself to change the system all by yourself. Yeah. You're not alone. And one thing that everyone can do, and I would encourage you to do safely, is to film the police, right? Because the one thing that that does seem to bring about too slow, too little, too late, but it seems to work a little bit, is sunshine, sunshine, sunshine. Mm-hmm. Film those, please.
But it kind of pisses them off, though.
It does. Film them from a safe distance.
So we're going to try and get in the last two questions. So why don't we go here?
Hi, everybody. This question, thank you for Jordan Davis' parents to coming out all the way out to the East Coast. I know it's been very long for you guys, but I'm going to make it very brief and very to the point. I'm a high school teacher in New Jersey, and I teach engineering. And I have a lot of diverse faces in my classroom, especially young African-American boys, and particularly Islamic women and young men. My question is that since there's a lot of crimes, not only going against African-American boys, but the Trump quote about banning Muslims, the rampant Islamophobia, especially with, I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, but Ahmed Mohabit, the kid that made the clock in Texas.
Oh, yes.
And his teacher thought it was a bomb, and he was arrested. And by the grace of God, he's, doing bigger, better things, getting a scholarship and meeting the president. One thing that I have is talk about to my students, especially the boys of color and of different ethnicities and religions, is perception. And some of my kids, coming in with the stereo, pants sagging down, and I see a lot of young ladies, Linda, who wear the hijab. So my question to you guys is how important is the discussion between us and our youth today, especially people of color, about perception, about how we carry ourselves and how certain people who may not be familiar with those different backgrounds perceive us, and thus, especially for Ron and for Linda.
think Lumumba was saying this earlier, and it's a really important point for me, and I fight with people all the time about this, but I'm never going to tell a kid to pick up his pants, ever. He can wear his pants down to here if he wants to. I mean, I think that and the reason why I say that is that for women who wear hijab, like, it ain't like we just wear this whenever we feel like because we think it's cute. Like, this is part of our religion, right? And I'm not saying the way you wear your pants is part of your religion, but it's how you want to do it. This is a free country. You could wear your pants, not wear pants. You can do whatever you want. And I think that if we continue to teach our kids what the right way to look like is, or how high you put your pants, and to whose standards, and who's the audience that's supposed to be perceiving you, that's a problem for me, because right now I'm hearing young women, people probably see this on Facebook, they're putting out like safety tips, like when you're walking in the street, don't stand too close to the train platform, wait till the train gets there to get on the train. Like, this is United States of America. Like, we're not supposed to be walking around like this. Ain't no third world country. So I think for our kids, this important idea of like, that you're their role model. You a black man, you're a high school teacher, like, they look up to you. And I think whatever you're doing for them, and just being there for them and letting them be, I think is the most important thing that we do for our kids. I tell my young women all the time, I said, you know what? I said, I'm gonna walk out in the streets of New York City, I'm gonna look just like this. I'm not saying that my safety is not at risk, but I wanna be in a country where I'm unapologetically who I am. I'm unapologetically Muslim. I want young black men to be unapologetically black, and I want young women to be unapologetic black women, Muslim women, whatever women you are. So I think we can't keep this idea of like how to act and how to be, because we're always telling people to act how the white man wants us to act, right? Like, this is just who I am. This is how I'm going to be every single day. So I think just encouraging kids, making the space for them in your class to be who they are, right? And maybe they're not safe outside of your classroom, but if you're like, oh, that hijab you're wearing today, I love that color. Like, you just look good in that. Like, I really like that one. Or, you know, like you think that's, you know, like when I'm walking in the streets of New York City and like somebody opens a door for me, and like there's a young black man opens a door for me, and I walk by and I say, thank you, brother. That means the world to me. Like, you have no idea that very simple act of just normal behavior means the world to people. And when I see a young black man and I want to open the door for him, he looks at me like, you know, just give me that look. That kind of like understanding that we have, that I respected him, that I valued who he was, that this time I'm gonna open the door for you. I think it's important how we treat our people to be valuable. Like, we're always looking at the approval from the outside, but I want my own people to love me. I don't care about anybody else. I want to love me. I want my people to love me. I want other people of color to love me. And if we love each other, we got each other's back, ain't nobody can do anything to us.
Let me say, if you know, it's important for a number of reasons to really push back on this idea of policing our appearance. Number one, I think it contributes to the whole criminalization of a culture, of hip-hop culture, number one. And let's be real also, you probably around my age, but we've always had a moment in our development where we've done some really crazy fashion stuff.
Yeah, I did.
Y'all remember when you used to wear your pants backwards, right? You had the sneakers with no laces.
Sure did.
Every generation's gonna have something, right? And they're gonna grow out of it, right? Hopefully. The guys that's 45 years old with their pants brought down, they got a problem. But no one's pants height has ever saved their life. It hasn't. We have to be able to really push back on this whole idea of having to fix ourselves up and position ourselves and perform in a certain way in order to just stay alive, in order to be safe. Because we're switching the focus. We need to deal with the systems that are criminalizing our bodies, that are criminalizing our cultures, that make that unsafe.
And also, I just want to say that, first of all, I'm going to acknowledge Jaziri X is here, a spoken word poet. Stand up, Jaziri X. He puts himself on the line all the time. He wears his X cap, and he walk out the door right now, the police going to look at him. But this young brother, he's powerful. Heard him speak. He's always at the Left Forum here in New York, so come check him out during Memorial Day holiday. He's always at the Left Forum.
Everybody?
I know everybody. I give props to folks that's working hard and, against the system and the movement. And, like they say, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a movement. It's a human rights movement. It's not a civil rights movement. It's a human's right. Okay, so let's go back to your question, young man. My thing is this, it takes me back when you said that to the 60s. There was one point in the 60s when Huey P. Newton and all the boys out in Oakland were doing their thing. And the brothers got into solidarity. The brothers started wearing dashikis. You remember that? Dashikis? What happened to the dashikis? What happened to the Angela Davis haircuts? What happened to all that stuff? What happened was, we exerted ourselves, our independence, but we were seen as militant because we had a dashiki on. If a woman had the afro, big Angela Davis afro, she was seen as militant. So with your degree, your PhD, your master's degree, you knock on corporate America, they said, we don't have a job for you. So they dumbed us down. We became dressing like they want us to dress to get that job. You don't see brothers in Google with dashikis. You don't see brothers, in these corporations for Coca-Cola and all that with dashikis. You know why? Because, they want that job. We have to get to a point where what we dress like pales against the knowledge that we have, that they need us. Whoopi Goldberg wears her braids proudly, but they need her on the show. You understand? She doesn't dumb it down for anybody. Okay? So we need more people like that, And so if we get more people like that, how we dress won't matter because we're still intelligent. It has nothing to do with our intellect. So I say if the young men want to wear their pants down, that's fine, but let them know that they have to work twice as hard to get that job because that's corporate America. That's the same America that has the Constitution that still to this day says that we're 3/5 of a human being. Remember what you're working with right here, okay? So, we're still like Dred Scott. We're not a citizen until we become a human being, so understand that. And so I say to you, brothers, tell your class that, you can be individual, you can dress the way you like, but keep getting that education. Keep getting that education because, like Albert Einstein said, there's always going to be racism in America until they become educated and enlightened. So you have to continue to do that.
Thank you.
Our last question.
First and foremost, thank you for your presence. Thank you for being here. In the film, you had mentioned, there was a brief moment where you mentioned when you, I guess, initially made contact with Trayvon's parents, and his father had said, welcome to the club that no one wants to be a part of, but you're a member. Can you speak a little bit as parents to that membership and what it has meant for you and in what ways it may kind of bring you maybe closer to a space of healing or just about the club?
Well, that club is Tracy, that club, right? Tracy Martin really, for me, was one of the first to step out there, as a father. Because you always saw the mothers on CNN, MSNBC, all the usual suspects, because the mothers have the emotion. They birth the child, and they want to see that emotion, and they bring the circle of mothers up, and and you see that from time and time again. And I sit back and I tell Lucy that sometimes. I say, I feel marginalized as a father. Fathers, sometimes we cry in the dark, right, guys? Sometimes, when things hurt us, we don't particularly show it when the lights are bright, because you're born and your parents bring you up to be the leader of your family, to protect your loved ones, protect your wife, protect your children. So you have to be strong. But we hurt and we cry. And so Tracy brought Sean Bell's father down, the young man that was killed at the bachelorette party here in New York. William Bell came down, his father. Tracy brought a few other fathers, down there. And we had about 12 fathers. Oscar Grant's Uncle Bobby from Oakland, California, and got us together and said, the media's going to marginalize you just because they don't think much of black fathers to begin with. Right. They portray us as either in prison or in control of the state prisons, or drug addicts, or we have 12 babies across the country and we don't pay child support. that's our MO, you know? And so when they come across fathers like Trayvon's father, fathers that stand up like Uncle Bobby, fathers all over this country that feel just as terribly, if not more, than the mothers do. They don't get the platform from the media to show and to speak about it. And so time and time again, when you go into these meetings with these fathers, we say, you know what? Each time that you get in front of a microphone, let them know how the men feel about what's going on. You don't understand the hurt that we have when I sit on my couch and when I used to look at football games with Jordan, and I look at the football games of the New York Giants, and he's not there. When they score a touchdown, when Odell scores a touchdown, I look over at the couch, and Jordan's not there. So much so that when I had my Giants jacket on, after Jordan was killed the next week, I got a letter and a book from the coach of the Giants. And I could not believe this letter, a handwritten letter from the coach of the Giants. And so people are looking at what you do on television, because he looked and saw some interviews and say, I'm very sorry that you lost your son, Mr. Davis, and I'm glad that you're just not spewing hate all across this country and that you're not causing people to riot in Jacksonville, because he used to be the coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so Tom Coughlin didn't want that to happen. And so people are watching you. Me and Lucy were invited by President Obama to My Brother's Keeper initiative at the White House. They screened actually this film at the White House. So people are watching, and I just think that I know the network of females is strong. Black Lives Matter is led by females, Alicia Garza and Opal and Carmen, and, you know, I know that. And I can name probably 12 organizations that are led by females. I can only maybe name 2 that are led on the streets, grassroots, by males. And so if we're not going to lead, then we must support our queens. Every man in this room should support their queen if they're leading. I support Lucy in what she's doing with Everytown. And so do not let us be separated by gender, whether you queer, LGBT. Do not let us be separated. Do not let us be separated when we think that they're talking about the Muslims, so we don't care. If they do that to the Muslim, they do that to the black people. If they do that to the queer people, they do that to the black people. If they do that to the Mexicans and the Latinos, they do it to the black people. So you cannot let them separate gender, separate sexual orientation. You can't let them separate nationalities. When it's wrong and it's discrimination, you must fight it any and everywhere.
And let me speak from the mother's perspective. Definitely speaking from the mother's perspective. Yes, a mother's heart is what the country usually hears. But even in that, there's stigmatism with the black mothers. We are vilified because the country and the world says that you didn't raise them properly. That's the reason why they were gunned down, because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing something wrong. It's automatically assumed that they are in the wrong and that we are not good mothers. We didn't raise them right. They didn't do the right thing. I didn't do the right thing. That's the reason why they were gunned down. And as a message to your whole community, this is what will continue to happen if you don't raise your boys and raise your children right. So, you know, there's a stigma on the mother. Even though you hear the voice, we're still looked upon as you didn't do it right. And you have no man in the household. That's why you didn't get it right. And where are the fathers? As if to say that a mother, a strong black minority mother, cannot raise a strong black man. And that is a terrible misnomer. Most of the households in this country that do not have fathers have very strong, proud, educated, godly black women that are raising strong, educated, godly black men. So I was sitting in a meeting with Hillary Clinton. And yes, all the mothers, we were there. We were summoned to speak with her. Michael Brown's mother, Trayvon Martin's mother, Eric Garner's mother. I was there, and Hydale Pendleton's mother. I mean, all of the mothers of the high-profile shootings. And it was so painful to me as I turned and I looked at Cleo Pendleton and I said, I can't believe we have to sit here. I can't believe why we are here. Even though, yes, she wants to hear from us, and yes, she wants to hear our stories. She already has our profiles and our bios. She already knows the stories. But the fact that we had to sit there to convince her to take some responsibility if she's placed in office, to care about what's happening to our children. And it has to be the mothers to do that, because we're raising these children, these babies that are being gunned down in the street. So if it is not the voice of the mother, then it's not going to happen. Any cultural change or shift in this country has been led by a woman. And this one, too, will be led by a woman. Yes, the men are just as integral and important, but it will be led by a woman because of the mother's heart. Our babies, we have birthed the babies that are dying in the streets.
I think I want to wrap by just bringing back the call to action that Ron mentioned, which is go get change. I think that's our call to action for the evening, and please join me in thanking the panelists for their time. And I would just like to invite Chelsea back up to give some closing remarks, and then we'll let you go.
And I have some wristbands for you also.
That's great.
Awesome. So I also would love to give a round of applause to Torrence Boone for moderating today. And it's a great example of how our Google leadership also, has chosen to use your place of privilege and your place of influence to show up for this dialogue. So thank you. So I know it's late, but I wanted to quickly let everybody know a couple next steps, just so you know how to expect to hear from us after this. So after tonight's event, we'll email everybody tomorrow with a survey with some challenging questions to really let the content of tonight sink in and give you tools and kind of thoughts for how to make this real in your own life. I also encourage you guys to wear the t-shirts that we provided. From other screenings, it's such a good dialogue spur. So wear those t-shirts and share what you experienced tonight. And last but certainly not least, you have bios for every single panelist. And so we would love for you to plug into each cause that's represented on stage. And I think we'll all be around for a little bit, so feel free to stick around for a couple questions. But thank you all for showing up and getting uncomfortable with us this evening. And we look forward to, now all being in this journey together. So however you walk away tonight, just feel empowered to do your part. So thank you.